Hello, everyone. We are still in Unit 2, Chapter 7. If you have not watched the negligence duty lecture, please do so because it will make everything make more sense. Okay, so remember, negligence is when we have a duty of care and we've breached that duty and we've caused injury to someone. Okay, so we're going to talk about breach of duty. And breach of duty basically says, remember, we have to act as a reasonably prudent person would in the same situation, and we didn't. So if we didn't do that, then we need to look at not only how the person would act, but did I breach a duty to you? And so we are going to talk about things like foreseeability, the seriousness of the risk, ease or difficulty avoiding the risks, personal characteristics such as age, experience, physical limitations, and context in how we acted. Okay, that also is kind of when we look at duty. And I talked a little bit about foreseeability. If I have a duty to you, and did I breach that duty? Sometimes these two things overlap when you're looking at how to evaluate them. Okay, if you know the elements are duty, breach, and causation, then what you want to look and say, how did a reasonable person act and did I act that way? Well, how do I determine how I should act and whether or not I breached that? There's a famous case and it's called Palsgraf versus Long Island Railroad. And yes, these are my little video things, so they're a little bit cheesy, but they do the fact. We have this railroad company and we have a passenger who's running. There's my passenger bouncing around. And so we have this nice railroad worker that says, come on aboard, I'll help you, right? So the train is moving and he pulls the person off, okay? And so the duty of a railroad worker is going to be act like a reasonable person. And so you have to ask yourself, was it reasonable to pull a passenger onto a moving train? Okay. And most people would probably say that's not really that reasonable, right? Well, you can imagine all the different things that can happen, right? But I don't know if you'd imagine this. The passenger, okay, when he dropped his suitcase, unbeknownst to the railroad worker, there was some dynamite in it. Yeah, this is 1928, remember. The dynamite exploded and it hit one of the rails on the railroad, and there was this scale. They used to have these big old scales that you could weigh your baggages on and things, and it was sitting next to a bench where Miss Palsgraf was, and it hit her. So you see this whole chain of event. And so Palsgraf says, I'm going to sue the Long Island Railroad because I have these injuries. And the question is, did they have a duty to her? And was it breached when the railroad worker brought aboard the passenger? And the way we have to answer this is, what was the complained activity? What did they do, right? Think about it. Their complained activity was pulling, right, the passenger aboard because that's how we got the injuries, right? So, did they breach a duty to Miss Palsgraf by doing that? Okay. And what the court said is, well, is it reasonably foreseeable that she would have been at risk? And they said, okay. So we've got a guy running and it's probably reasonable to think, yes, we breached a duty because we shouldn't have pulled this passenger aside, and anybody would have known that the passenger might be able to get hurt or other passengers on the train. But would you think it's reasonable? Would you think that you breached that duty when the suitcase falls and there's dynamite and that dynamite hits a railroad spike or thing that knocks over a scale and hits Miss Palsgraf? And the court said no, that it's just not foreseeable. And so you didn't breach your duty to Miss Palsgraf by pulling the passenger aboard. If the passenger would have gotten hurt or that luggage would have flown off and hit someone nearby, and we'd probably breach our duty to them. But this is way too unforeseeable, and therefore you could not breach your duty. Now, there is one classification of negligence that says that you are negligent in itself, and it's called negligence per se. So that's our next point we want to write down is negligence per se is negligent in itself. And you don't have to put the negligent in itself in quotes, just put negligence per se is negligent in itself. And what does that mean? It means that certain activities we do or certain things we have, we are presumed to have a duty that we breached if someone gets hurt from them. And basically, this applies mostly to statutes. And what that says is we have these statutes to protect people, and if you violate them and you hurt someone in the type of class that was intended to protect those people, and they suffered the sort of harm that it was meant to protect, then you don't have to go through the whole spiel of saying they didn't act as a reasonable person and they had a duty to act as a reasonable person. They breached that duty. Okay, all you have to show is harm. So a lot of this would be things like federal regulations of maybe perhaps like manufacturing, or if you have a building that's not built to code and someone's injured and they suffer the harm as a result of that, that could be negligence per se. So it's a special class of negligence where you do not have to prove breach. You don't have to prove duty or breach of duty. They broke the law that was supposed to protect someone, and someone was harmed because of them breaking the law, and they suffered the type of injuries, and therefore all we have to do is prove causation. So that is your breach of duty in a nutshell. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.